Welcome back for another episode of Inside Moves. I'm Carl Blum here in New York City at Slam headquarters. Today I'm sitting down with Robbie Heegen. Robbie is the CEO and founder of Endaoment, the internet's community foundation, and the first ever fully on-chain donor-advised fund. Well, I kind of want to start with you. You are a super charitable, how would you describe yourself? Like somebody who's philanthropic. Like what's the...
I think it's like, I don't know, it's kind of cringe.
That's okay. That's okay.
It's kind of cringe. Like, it is not the thing that defines me.
Okay.
Like, I'm a tech dork.
Yeah.
I'm a music person. I love music.
Yeah.
I love to cook.
Yeah.
And, like, my life is so much more than the giving I do. And yet, you know, like, I run a community foundation, and it's really not so much. I think people think you've got to have this huge heart, or something's got to be better about you than everybody else to give away some of what you've made. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I kind of want to like normalize being a normal person and giving.
Yeah, no doubt.
Like, it's the original tagline on the Endaoment website was "Hello, philanthropist."
Hello, philanthropist.
and like,
did you write that? You had to.
Yeah, no, like it's totally, that's like totally me too. Like
that's what you did at Apple, right? Too.
No, not at all.
Oh,
like,
really?
It was.
Well, I mean,
like personally, yes.
Yeah.
But like, so I learned about giving through taxes.
Yeah.
And I think like, yeah, that's kind of why like this sort of like high and mighty philanthropist title.
Yeah.
I think is kind of cringe.
Yeah.
Because like really it's like you're good at mitigating taxes.
Yeah.
Right? So like, and then after you've mitigated the taxes, you start to ask yourself like, oh, okay, like what do I care about?
Yeah.
Right? Like what matters to me? What do I want to see in the world?
Yeah.
You know, like what if I didn't have to worry about my own bag? You know, like how would I take care of the places and the people that got me to where I am?
Totally.
And that's why you see people who are like immensely successful often being the philanthropist, because they've gotten to this point where it's like, okay, I'm not so worried about my own situation.
Yep.
That I can now think about how I want to make the world a better place.
Yep. And
I think like, yeah, that's maybe a toxic trait of our very capitalist society. Mm-hmm. Like, love capitalism, love nice things.
Yep.
But like the fact that we don't think about our impact on the world until we're rich enough to step back is something I'd like to kind of deconstruct.
Yeah.
And part of Endaoment is trying to break that down. Yeah. And trying to say like, if you're saving for your retirement, you should be putting aside money for your community. Yeah. If you give money to your children, you should give money to your community. Yeah. If you're having success, that success is relative. Yeah. And it's part of living in reciprocity with the environment is finding a way to like fill yourself up by giving your wealth away. Right. So for me, you know, like I learned about donor advised funds and giving, you know, because I had a CPA brother who was like, you've got all this, you know, X cost basis stock that came with your compensation plan. Like, if you were being savvy about this, you would consider giving a little bit of this, knocking down your AGI by, you know, Y number of dollars. And yeah, you'd wind up giving less money to the war machine, you know, or to the, you know, to the government pre the Doge, right? You know, like, and I think no matter what your takes are on government or on politics, like, there's something very empty about just throwing cash into the pool
Yeah.
and losing that agency over what do you want to fund.
Totally. I don't think that's, like without even going into the political conversation or whatever in government conversation, I don't think that's a hot take at all in modern America, where people are just growing increasingly frustrated with. We have this massive debate going on right now with this kid who killed the healthcare person, right? And healthcare is inevitably tied to government. It's kind of a similar thing where it's this mega engine where money's flowing into it. There's not a ton of transparency, and people don't feel like they're getting back what they're paying for.
Right.
And I feel like that's that's not an absolute take, but I think that most people are going to get behind you when you say, hey, there's a more effective way for your dollars to accomplish things than just continuing to blindly send it into the tax machine.
Right. It's like do you want your gains to go to interest payments on the national debt?
Yeah.
Or do you want to build a relationship with a program in your neighborhood
Yep.
that you feel filled up by
Yep.
because of your involvement?
Yep.
And I think people assume that you have to have hundreds of thousands of dollars, or that you have to have, made it in your career to start thinking about what you want to do in your community.
Yeah.
And what I think I've been super fortunate to get exposure to early on is that it's actually much easier to compartmentalize the work that you're doing and to build your self-identity
Yeah.
when you're a multifaceted person, regardless of your net worth.
Totally.
And you can make change in the world through just the relationship alone. And the question is, how short is the pathway to building that relationship?
Yeah.
How close are you to being a benefactor of the school you went to as a kid that got you to where you are today?
Mm-hmm.
Or the church that you grew up going to with your family?
Mm-hmm.
Or to the summer camp that got you out of the neighborhood that you shouldn't have been spending the summer in, because otherwise you'd be in a very different life situation.
Totally.
You don't have to be Jeff Bezos to go and build a relationship with that organization. But oftentimes the organization doesn't know how to get access to you, and you don't know how to get access to them. And maybe you go to their website and you give a little bit at their website, and maybe they get their email address, they put you on their listserv. But when you start talking about making grants from a donor-advised fund that can have multi-year commitments, maybe it's $100 a year over 3 years, and you want to see it go to this program, you wind up in a space that's way more deep of a relationship with the nonprofit.
Yeah.
And now you have taken something from a program earlier in your life, and it's done something for you.
Mm-hmm.
And you're saying, here I am coming full circle.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that we've learned in the winter, the crypto winter,
Yeah.
right? So we do digital asset giving.
Yep.
Primarily. That's our bread and butter. We now do everything.
Yep.
We've created this backwards compatible giving machine that is built on the modern rails, built on the crypto economic system,
Yep.
but takes NVIDIA stock,
Yeah.
takes your car,
Yeah.
takes your LPA interest in a hedge fund if you got that, and it takes your cash if you've got Venmo.
Yeah.
And everything in between. And what we've learned from the rise and fall of crypto over the last 3 years is that the nonprofits are excited no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
You can show up on their doorstep with $1 million. You can show up on their doorstep with $1,000. You can show up on their doorstep with $100. And they'll be like, whoa, this was not money we expected. This is found capital.
Yeah.
Basically. And I think so many people are like, I'll talk to people about DAFs and they'll be like, well, that's so cool. Like, I don't think I'm in the bracket.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's the first thing they'll say after I explain to them what we do. And I'm like, are you not in the Uber bracket? Like, you've got a private driver now in your pocket, right? Like, you didn't think you were too good to use Uber.
Yeah.
Or too poor to use Uber, or not rich enough to use a private driver.
Yeah.
But now you're very comfortable with Uber. And maybe even once in a while, you get the Uber Black or the Uber SUV, and you ball out a little bit, right? And it's like that brought the concept of having a private driver, of having a black car, brought it down to earth, right? And when we think about endowment and the role that we want to see it play with donor advised funds and with giving in general, like, the idea is for everybody to realize that, like, the internet can give them a private family foundation in 2 clicks. The question is, do you know what you're going to do with it?
Mm-hmm.
And how you're going to make a difference in your world. And it's not a function of how much money you give. That's, like, the really exciting part of what we're doing. And I think, like, there is a learned culture in the United States that this vehicle is just for tax dodging billionaires.
Yeah.
Like, I was reading an article in the Times the other day that was talking about, like, iDigit and, you know, like, estate tax dodging plans for the ultra wealthy. And in it was this treatise about donor advised funds. And it was kind of like, okay, well, what's the takeaway there? Like, yes, donor advised funds are being leveraged by the ultra wealthy to abuse the tax system.
Yeah.
But does that mean that the problem is the donor advised fund or the regulations around the donor advised fund? Or is the problem the, like, broader attitude towards taxes in our country?
Yeah.
And our ever bloating tax code and the sort of, like, cottage industry around tax mitigation versus the fact that, like, people should have the opportunity to have a donor advised fund so that they can divorce the personal financial decision of how much to give that's right for them and their family from where am I going to give this away?
Yeah.
You know, not every donor advised fund never gets given away. Not every donor advised fund is a grant-making endpoint for a private family foundation in order to meet their minimum. Not every donor-advised fund is this shady shell for people to hide money in.
Right.
And
I think interjecting with our story is helpful right now.
Yeah.
I know at JDS Sports we had a big year, so maybe this gets a little bit into the direction of, oh, this is the people that made a ton of money example. But we had a big year and put a bunch of money into a donor advised fund in 2021 through Endaoment.
Yeah.
And that initial amount that we put in, we have given away 60% over the next 3 years.
Right.
So we had donated 60% of the capital that was put into the donor advised fund. We figured out who over time where we wanted it to go, what mattered to us. We vetted stuff. So that instrument bought us the time with the tax, the time to make the decision on who to support with the immediate tax benefit at the end of 2021.
That's right. Yeah.
And then while it was sitting on the endowment platform, we had made back the entirety. The capital has grown back to the initial amount that we put into the fund in 2021.
Totally crazy.
So we know our impact is
that's not
entirely
normal, by the way.
Yeah. That's not normal.
But it is possible.
Yeah.
And I think, like, that's part of what's exciting about this vehicle is, like, you can have your own narrative that you're weaving about the impact you want to see in the world.
Yeah.
And that's super powerful. And it's like an important function for us to normalize around not just one class of people.
Yeah. So talk about that. Talk about, can you give me an example of, say, somebody that's my peer, right? I'm 29 years old. people that are my age, you get a call.
29,
I'm 29,
Carl?
yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah, I've been at JDS since 2019. It's been full-time 2019, 5 years. So I've known you for a bit now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Damn.
So talk to me, right?
Yeah.
I'm not Joe Sandberg. I don't have this long, successful career.
Right.
But
Yet.
But I have a steady income. I can take Uber.
Yeah. You Uber.
I Uber.
Yeah.
And I'm learning about this stuff through, my team and our work with you guys.
Right.
But, me and my peers, I think you're right. I think a lot of us think, I'm not at that point where I should start thinking about the tax benefits and supporting my community, because I just got to get ahead first, right?
Yeah.
So can you walk through an example of say somebody makes $100,000 a year, which is increasingly not that much money, but somebody who probably takes Uber.
Yep.
What does that really look like for them? Like use round numbers.
Yeah.
Can you explain what these instruments really are? Like a lot of these people, I don't even know if they've ever heard the acronym AGI and how a write-off at the end of the year affects something like that.
Yeah. So every year you pay your taxes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the first criteria for charitable giving.
Yeah.
Which is kind of not obvious to everyone.
Yeah.
Right? Like criteria number one is, are you a taxpayer?
Okay.
You're a taxpayer.
I'm a taxpayer.
And you've made a certain amount of money, and the government withheld against that money.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of assuming what your tax rate is going to be. And when you file your taxes, you have a choice. Now, with the obvious caveat that, I am not a CPA.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not financial advice. Do your own research, talk to a CPA. But, you make a certain amount of money, and it gets withheld. Your wages get garnished in order to pay your taxes, so that you don't wind up getting a bunch of money and then spending it all,
right,
and then being like, wait,
right,
I owe tax, right? So that's withholdings on your wages. And at the end of the year, when you're preparing your taxes, maybe the spring after the calendar year, you get your taxes ready, you have a choice. You can either take what's called the standard deduction, or you can itemize your deductions.
Mm-hmm.
And the standard deduction is $27,000, I think is what it is. It actually varies depending on your marital status and all this. There are variable standard deductions. And if you take the standard deduction and you've given to charity in that previous year, you kind of say the standard deduction is more than what I've given to charity.
right,
And so I actually want the standard deduction because it's a better deal for me.
right,
I pay less tax. But there comes a point where you can actually get a certain number of credits that exceeds the standard deduction.
gotcha.
Right? So let's say the standard deduction erroneously is a nice round number.
Yep.
$20K.
Yep.
Right? If you have deductions that are worth more than $20,000, it's in your interest to itemize them, to list them out.
Yep.
Right? That's what it means to itemize your deductions, is to list out the things that you do that are tax credits.
Yep.
Over that past year. Things that you did that were tax credits over that past year. And if those things add up to more than the standard deduction, then giving charitably can help push you over. Or let's say, you bought a house, you bought an EV,
Yep.
You got a number of different deductions, and let's say you're at $15K.
Yep.
And you're like, okay, I can either take the standard deduction, or there's this organization that I want to support and I want to give them $6,000.
Yeah.
Right? So now you're at $21K in deductions. You'll pay less in taxes by itemizing, by listing out your deductions, than you would by taking the standard. Because as soon as you take the standard, all of your itemized stuff is whoosh, it's gone.
Yeah.
Right? So enter somebody making 150K.
Yep.
Or enter somebody making 200K. And erroneously, we're going to say that the standard deduction is still $20,000.
Yep.
Right? Now you're in a position where you've got 180K of income that you owe taxes on because you take the standard deduction out of the picture, right? And now your total income minus the standard deduction, and then you get taxed on that.
Yeah.
At different tax brackets depending on how much you've made, right? And that's the tax bracket system that we've come up with.
Yep.
Obviously, it's taken me like 4 minutes to get here, so like
No,
it's not
good, though.
very.
I'm following it well. It's good.
Okay, good. All right, and Adam, my brother, if I got any of this wrong, throw it in the comments. And thanks. And so then you're getting taxed on that, and so the question comes like, all right, I don't want to pay taxes on $180,000. What can I do? To lower my taxes.
Yeah.
And what you can choose to do is give. And if you choose to give, you're going to want to give more than the standard deduction, right? Because otherwise you might as well just take the standard deduction. Or you're going to want to know all of your deductions, add those up, and then give more than that plus your charitable donation.
Yep.
Adding up to more than the standard deduction.
Yeah.
And ultimately, like what you're trying to do is say like, here's a holistic picture of my finances. Here's what I owe taxes on. And if I give this much, I can take something that's on my balance sheet, my personal balance sheet. Let's say I have some stocks, that I hold at E-Trade.
Yeah.
Right? Or let's say I bought Bitcoin at 20K, the bottom, right, of this last cycle. And let's say you bought sub 20K Bitcoin, and you're like, okay, I want to take some gains on this, or this is going to be part of my income this year because I sold some of it.
Yep.
How can I minimize the impact on my taxes of this sell?
Yep.
Or how can I minimize the impact of my huge Christmas bonus that I got this year, or how can I minimize the impact of a gift I got from my parents that was above the limit, right? And one of the ways that you can offset it is by picking the thing in your personal portfolio that meets two criteria. One, you've held it for more than a year, and two, you got it for cheap. So, like, maybe you bought a piece of art from an up-and-coming artist, and you bought it 5 years ago, right? You're a stylish dude. You've got taste. And you bought a piece of art, and now, like, you're like, oh, wow. Like, I have this piece of art. It's probably worth, I bought it for $1,000 or something. Bought it for a couple $100, and maybe now it's worth $5, 10. And you're like, I don't really like it anymore. And I took this income over here this year. Yeah. Like, that's a great candidate for you to go sell that, right? Like, and use those proceeds to cover your taxes. But if you sell it yourself, you wind up making more money. Which is a problem, right? We're trying to not make more money, right? We're trying to give money away. And so what you can do with endowment, or what you can do with a donor advised fund, is take that thing in your portfolio, that piece of artwork, that chunk of Bitcoin that you bought, that NVIDIA stock that you got when you were gaming as a teenager, when your parents were like, buy a stock, and you held on to it in that account until it's now mooned, and you're like, whoa, if I sell this, I'm going to owe a bunch of tax on it. But if I give it, I don't have to pay any of that tax. And that right there, that's the DAF in the nutshell, is I've taken some amount of gains. I am a taxpayer, and I have made money. And I would like to take the value of money that the government sees me as making and tone it down a notch so that I pay them less. And one way that you can take the amount of money that the government sees you as having made in a calendar year is by giving in that same calendar year. right?
Gotcha.
So if you take the thing that's in your portfolio that also has a big tax obligation on it, and you go, actually, I'm going to slide this over to a charity. The charity gives you a receipt for that, and you staple that receipt to your tax report for that year and say, okay, take all the money I made and subtract the value of this thing I gave.
Yeah.
And you can subtract the full value of the thing you gave, even if you bought it and had a huge appreciation on that asset.
Yep.
So you can understand why people like, get bogged down in the education around like what it makes for a good DAF asset.
Yeah.
And it's like anything that's complicated like that, like technology can play a role in making more approachable.
Yep.
And so we try to do that, right? And then like B, there's the how do I know before the year is up how much money I made and what's going to be a good asset and like who can I talk to about this? And so, that's why we see most people with DAFs having at least a financial advisor of some sort who's helping them think about it, or they are themselves pretty tax savvy.
Yep.
It's not really like the same consumer level vehicle, although we're seeing other people in the DAF space start to introduce consumer level DAFs, including Endaoment, but we're sort of dancing on that line between like consumer and prosumer.
Yeah. So talk about that. I mean, crypto millionaires are a relatively, I guess becoming more and more common, but are a relatively new thing. And I guess there was this problem that arose where getting their crypto gains into the situation that you just outlined was kind of your white space, was what gave birth to that was my understanding.
That was the OG.
Yeah.
Yeah. Basically, like, Endowment's origin story is that, I'm sort of patient zero.
Yeah.
Like, I had been in a position where I was working at a big tech company, and they would compensate me with stock, right? So they give me a base salary, and then they would also give me a little bit of stock every couple of months.
Yep.
And this is a common practice. This is like, especially for people in like technical fields, it's sweat equity. It's like, how do you get a chunk of the business for the work that you're doing, right? And oftentimes you're getting that at like lower valuations.
Right.
And I got in the habit, thanks to my brother, of putting some of those stocks into a DAF. Mm-hmm. Right? Because like, it was like, oh, I got these stocks, but like, it doesn't really feel like cash in my bank account, but like the government sees it as income. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I don't want to pay a bunch of tax on this. And rather than paying a bunch of tax on this, I'd rather like get the warm fuzzies. Like I'd rather get the fill me up feeling.
Yeah.
And so I would take some of those stocks and I would put them into a donor advised fund. Mm-hmm. And then the donor advised fund takes them, sells them, turns it into cash, and I get to give it away to nonprofits. Yep. Now, I quit that job because I was burnt out. I couldn't do it anymore. It was soul sucking. It wasn't doing it for me. And when I quit, the stock faucet turns off. You forfeit all of it when you quit. Mm-hmm. And so that was like a big part of like the equation is like, am I ready to forfeit all this? Right. And made the decision to forfeit it. And then, more and more I started falling down the crypto rabbit hole and started taking very, very small chunks of my savings, putting them into coins, and seeing what happened. Yeah. Kind of set and forget. And over the course of several years, some of those coins panned out. And I was like, oh, okay, great. Like, I did this with my stocks. Like, I'm going to go do this with my coins now. Yeah. And so I go to the organization where I had been giving stock, and I say, hey, like, do you guys take coins? And they kind of just like laugh me out of the room. They're like, no, we don't. They're like, we have no idea where we would even start, you know? And at the time, part of the reason why I left my old job was like to go and do some like self work, to like really figure out what was next for me. And I was learning how to code at the time. And I was like, okay, well, like, what if I try to like make a little proof of concept piece of software that allows you to send in coins and sends me a receipt for donating them. I've given up the coins, and then you guys take the coins and you sell them for dollars using this piece of software. It like does it automatically for you, automagic like selling, right? And then sends those dollars into my existing account with you. And they're like, yeah, I mean, like if you build that, like we'll let you use it.
Awesome.
And that was the seed. That was the thing that kind of got us started. And to this day, the person who worked with me on that proof of concept sits on the board at Endaoment. And we remain very, very close with that community foundation. They're based out of San Francisco. And, oftentimes they'll send us donors who are trying to give crypto, and then they'll give crypto to us, and then we'll just move it over to their program. And like, we're totally cool with doing that. And I think, I only knew to do this because of my brother, like I explained, right? And so what's interesting about the crypto explosion is like you have younger people who maybe didn't have a job where they got stock, right? Like that's for sure, that's a privilege, right? And like, but now there's these liquid markets for investments that require no permission to enter or exit. That, you have 13-year-olds making meme coins that are, yielding millions or hundreds of thousands of dollars. And like they're a taxpayer, right? They're a dependent, but like now they got to think about taxes. Maybe they're not 13. Let's call them 25, right? Like let's do you, right? Like let's say you bought, like you knew about crypto in 2017, and let's say you bought some ETH at sub 200. Congratulations, by the way. It's going very well for you. And like now you're taking gains. It's starting to fund your lifestyle. You're starting to actually use this investment to pay your rent, pay your credit card bills, use that cash. And what you're learning very quickly is that every time you sell some of that crypto, it's a taxable event.
It's a taxable event,
And not only is it a taxable event, but basically all of it is taxable gains, right? Like if you bought it at $2,000 and you sell it at $2,200, only the $200 difference is the taxable gain. But you bought it at $200 and it's trading at $2,200. So you've got $2,000 per coin that you owe capital gains tax on. And for many people who are very quickly having windfall moments, that can happen. And remember, those windfalls are relative, right? So for some people, $1,000 is, and for some people, $10,000 is like, whoa. And, for other people, it's like not as exciting, but maybe $100,000 is like life-changing money to them. And some people are making millions or tens of millions of dollars. But regardless, they're learning very quickly about like how capital gains tax gets calculated on appreciated assets. And oftentimes what happens is they wait till the end of the year to think about it. Especially in crypto, because you're trading right up until the bell rings. Because there is no bell in crypto. The bell is December 31st at midnight. Right? And then your taxes are locked. And so, it's often like, today is December, like 10th, 11th? Like, it is often, we see like 50% or more of our donations from this point on till the end of the year. So we play basically 11 and a half months for 2 weeks. And it's like insanity these last 2 weeks because people are waiting to figure out what they made from selling over the year. And then when they figured that out, they look at their position and they say, okay, I'm going to owe this much tax. This is how much I made. And that means I'm going to owe this much tax. And they'll say, okay, well, like, they'll call their H&R Block homie, or their tax guy. Or they'll call TurboTax even, get on the live chat, with TurboTax. And, you're sitting there and you're like, I don't know. I just ran the numbers on coin tracker and it says I made $250,000 this year. Like, I don't have $125,000 to pay in tax. Like, what do I do? And the tax advisor goes like, well, have you thought of a DAF? And that's the moment where most people are like, DAF?
Yeah.
You know? And so we exist for that moment effectively.
Yeah, that's great. And I think, it really hits home with us because we were in this situation and we needed an easy way for crypto to go into DAF. And the crypto community absolutely loves Endaoment. I think it's I guess there's Daffy, there's some other that are kind of following suit, right? That are getting better at being like kind of crypto native and getting better at addressing the crypto community. You guys were first movers, and I think have the best brand, but it's kind of weird.
That's nice of you to say.
It's kind of weird being crypto centric in finance, and you guys are now trying to expand
go the other way.
What is that like?
It's changed a lot.
Yeah.
It changes month to month. And really it tracks with the crypto market.
Yeah.
And that's like kind of a letdown.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it sucks that it takes price appreciation for people to look and see the value of the technology itself.
Mm-hmm.
But that's kind of the reality. The financial advisory world is very reputation based and very built around relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's about who you know.
Yeah.
And it's very risk averse, right? So like if you are a financial advisor and you take a ton of risk and lose all of your clients' money, like you're no longer a financial advisor, like you're out of a job.
Yeah.
Right? So like anything that feels risk on or sketch or new or, intrepid, you often won't see your run-of-the-mill financial advisor go after it.
Yeah.
I have read countless reports from financial advisors about why we shouldn't invest in crypto. Right? Generally, right at the bottom of the market.
Yeah.
They feel super. It's the best buy signal that you can find.
Yeah.
If you get a memo from your financial advisor at a seemingly it couldn't get any worse time for crypto, that's when you should buy.
That's when you should buy.
But in general, like they have all these characteristics about themselves that makes it hard for them to get their head wrapped around what we're doing.
Yeah.
And why it's empowering their relationship with their client.
Yeah.
And why it's the future of record keeping and just operational efficiency, overhead reduction, user experience expectations of younger clients.
Yeah.
All of these things that work to their benefit. There's a media narrative getting in the way of them.
Yeah.
Like actually adopting it.
Yeah.
And what's fun about working on Endaoment is you're like kind of the counterpoint. Right? Like people say, oh, all crypto is a scam. And I say like, I've got $70 million going to thousands of nonprofits that say otherwise.
Yep.
Right? Or, people say like, crypto's all volatility. I'll say like, we hold all of our assets as stable coins that earn 15% yield.
Yeah, it's like the best lending market you can find on the dollar is crypto. I keep telling my friends that I'm like, if you're looking for these high yield savings accounts, go buy some USDC. You're not going to get better yield anywhere.
You're not going to get better yield.
Yeah.
And who knows, you might get some free tokens on the side.
Yeah.
For using whatever system you're using.
Yeah.
Right? And like that's USDC denominated yield, not USDC plus native token denominated yield.
Yep.
Right? And like I think, for us, what we've spent a ton of time on, basically the first 2.5 years of Endaoment, you had to have crypto, you had to have a digital wallet, you had to have a degree basically in crypto to know how to use us.
Yeah.
And that's cool because that means we built the infrastructure from the ground up.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's all running on chain. But what has also been a huge evolution for the crypto market in general is this concept of abstraction.
Yeah.
Where you take all of the complexity, the degree in crypto that you used to need to have, and you hide it.
Yeah.
You hide it behind really beautiful, simple user flows.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you can approach Endaoment with just an email address,
Mm-hmm.
with a Google account, with an Apple account. And you show up, you log in like you would to Facebook or to any other website that you log in with Google on.
Mm-hmm.
And bam, you have an on-chain DAF in 2 clicks.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you don't need ETH for gas. You don't even need to know what gas is.
Yeah.
Right? Like it just works.
Yeah.
And that's been a huge unlock for us to showcase the benefits of the underlying financial products.
Yeah.
Because now it's not like this spooky, like, I don't know how to log in even, like, why would I even try to figure this out? Now
Right.
It's like, oh, like, I've used Acorns before, or I've connected to an account via Plaid before,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so like the login flow feels familiar now to them. So like they're able to like grok that this is just a web service.
Yeah.
And we also did a bunch of work to actually, what we found out was that people didn't want all the risk or perceived risk of crypto for their donor advised fund.
Yeah.
They wanted like boring investments for their donor advised fund because they're like, I want to give this away over time. Like I just want something, I want the QQQ.
Yeah.
I want VOO or I want Bill or I want, SPY. Like I just want an index fund basically, right? Or I just want a money market, cash equivalent, right? That is held at a qualified custodian. Mm-hmm. For my DAF. Mm-hmm. And so we've built in the ability now using our on-chain infrastructure to invest in off-chain investment opportunities mm-hmm. and use the blockchain as a record-keeping apparatus.
Yep.
And so now we have a DAF provider that looks, feels, operates just like Fidelity Charitable or Schwab Charitable or Vanguard Charitable or E-Trade Charitable or insert broker-dealer, insert custodian, and add the word charitable on the end. Like most of them have one of these. Mm-hmm. And they all do the same thing. It's move your stocks in, get the tax deduction, we'll sell it. You could put it into a number of ETFs or index funds, and then you can give it to any charity.
Yeah.
We're not going to get in your way, really. And that's like the base minimum assumption of a DAF provider. And now we can do that using entirely new infrastructure rails without people knowing that they're doing that. And I think that opens us up to crossing the chasm, so to speak. Like we are going from a phase with the digital asset market where everything is for early adopters to a phase where everything needs to be like grandparent proof.
Yeah.
Right? Like where you can't tell the difference.
Totally.
And
increasing amount of stuff, by the way. I keep like picking up stuff that's been in development for years. I'm like, wow. Like even chain abstraction, like Slingshot. I don't know if you've been on that app.
Amazing.
It's becoming grandma proof where you just get on, you don't even realize that it's all on crypto rails.
And I think there's also an awakening to crypto and blockchain or distributed ledger technology or, digital asset, like whatever the buzzword you want to use to talk about Bitcoin and its friends.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's increasing conflation of those two industries between blockchain and all of its friends and fintech. Mm-hmm. And the financial advisory space understands fintech. It's been around. And they understand it as primarily like software as a service.
Yeah.
And I think what's exciting about digital assets is we're no longer restricted to just software as a service fintech businesses now.
Yeah.
You can build full-fledged custodians. Mm-hmm. You can build full-fledged, assets under management-based businesses that are not just, like DTC savings apps, robot investors, mm-hmm. right? Like we can actually go and rebuild institutions from the ground up.
Yeah.
Right? Like the retirement house of the next 50 years is not going to look like the retirement house of the past 50 years.
Right.
And really that's the role that Fidelity, Schwab, Vanguard have been playing, is like we're the infrastructure layer for, you know, independent advisors around the country to manage people's future, to manage how they preserve their wealth and plan for their family and plan for their community.
Yeah.
And what we're saying with Endaoment is this technology gives us the opportunity for a fresh start.
Yeah.
For a much more transparent vehicle, for, you know, rebuilding business models from the ground up that are outcome aligned.
Yeah.
Rather than rent seeking and, you know, just moat creating.
So that's kind of where I was going. It's like I've got the pitch and I love Endaoment, but I came in through the ground floor. I'm a crypto native and I'm like, yeah, the tech's great. I can do all the things I want to do and it seems innovative. Customer service is great. And you guys are continually just shipping. It's just getting better every time we go there, right? So we'll never switch. We love it. The thing I don't understand is, because I never had to do these things from the other direction, and it's kind of like, what's the moat? Or like, what's the value add on top of the switching cost that beats the switching cost? And you know, how do you create the new retirement house from the ground floor up? Because you know, it seems like you need to convince traditional legacy users. I mean, I guess, you know, you could just keep going from the ground up, which is how it's been going, but to expedite and to really have that moment, what's the real pitch?
Yeah, you know, this is definitely a business to business interaction.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and there are things we can do around like lifestyle, you know, like part of what's so exciting about working with you guys is like you guys get the financial component, like the fintech side of it.
Yeah.
But your strength is the culture. Right? And so the opportunity to try and find ways to mold it into the culture and to like have really prominent sort of influencing voices show the masses the way to something that's better is awesome. Yeah. Right? In crypto economic systems, moats are not really the way.
Yeah, I agree.
Like in a world where everything is open source and anybody can fork your protocol, the question isn't how well are you defending your code?
Yeah.
It's how much enthusiasm are you getting, you know, pumped into the flywheel.
Yeah, the brand becomes kind of the moat.
It's like flywheels over moats is kind of, it was the response I gave to this person who asked us what our moat was. I was like, we don't have one, we have a flywheel.
Yeah.
And the flywheel that we have is that nowhere else can you give anything in your portfolio, give anywhere in the world, bring your advisor along with you, and not eat admin fees that just go back to the custodian or the broker-dealer.
Yeah.
And it's like, it will take people a minute to absorb that. And, you know, our job at Endaoment is to try to explain to people the impact that's being left on the table by them kind of making a hand-wavy decision about who their DAF provider is.
Yeah.
And how the people who do prioritize getting incentive aligned with charitable giving are going to wind up having stronger relationships with their clients, are going to wind up retaining more AUM, are going to wind up having a more holistic practice that can serve for many generations rather than having to re-win the next generation every time. And so I think, like, especially when we're talking with RIAs or we're talking with, you know, financial institutions that have donor advised funds that, you know, are beholden to any one of these particular restrictions, it's not so much a question of, you know, switch everybody over. It's like, just give it a try.
Yeah.
And we think you'll do your own switching because the flywheel is different over here.
Yeah. So who exactly is it that you need to convince, right? Because if I'm going to consider starting a DAF, I'm probably just going to follow my financial advisor, wealth management group, whatever.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
So who is it enough to pitch consumers, or does there need to be these like, watershed moments with, like you said, B2B, or like what actual job title do you think needs to be the person that you convince?
I think it's the fee-only advisor that we need to convince. It's that, and there's like a higher leverage opportunity at the custodian level as well. So like nobody opens a DAF. Not nobody. Some people do open a DAF on their own.
Yeah.
Because like we were talking about earlier, like they're tax savvy people.
Yeah.
Right?
Or they're crypto people that are like, I have no options.
Yeah, or they're crypto people who are learning the hard way, right? And like, or they're day traders who are learning the hard way, or like anybody who is doing like if you're on Wall Street Bets, and you YOLO'd into AMC, and it mooned on you. Like you're learning real fast about long-term versus short-term capital gains.
Yep.
And in those environments, like some people will browse Reddit long enough to find out about donor advised funds, or some people will, get targeted by their custodian where they're trading at and say, hey, you trade at E-Trade, come try E-Trade Charitable, you'll pay less tax. Mm-hmm. Right? And they're like, ooh, click, know? But the vast majority of the 2 million DAFs that exist in the country are opened because an advisor tells their client to do it.
Yep.
And the advisor generally has a preference on where that happens because they want either visibility into the account or they want to trade the DAF assets themselves. That's less likely. But in general, it's just like whatever they feel like is risk off, right? Mm-hmm. Again, to their motivation. They don't want to take risk in the DAF space of like their donor their client being unhappy about what they recommended and then being like, oh, you don't know the stuff.
Yeah.
But they also do care about like some of them are like more tech forward and they care about using the latest and greatest, especially if their clientele is a little bit younger. Mm-hmm. And so what we have is a lot of wealth advisory firms that are used to using Fidelity Charitable. Mm-hmm. And that's why they're the biggest DAF provider in the country, and they have $66 billion in donor advised fund assets as of this year.
Yep.
And
wow.
I know,
a lot
right?
of money.
And the stock behavior for those is Fidelity gives you about 7 to 10 options for investments that are all their highest expense ratio managed ETFs. And that's all you get to choose from. And so there are these people who are making significant assets in alternatives, who are making significant gains in alternative assets or making significant gains in digital assets or even in the traditional stock market, but they're not doing it with an index fund. They're doing it aligned with their values or with their investment thesis. And then when it's time to give, they basically relinquish all of that optionality.
Yeah.
In the name of making the custodian that hosts the DAF as much money as possible.
Yep.
And oftentimes they just like hide behind the reality that like there's regulation about how much control you can have.
Yeah.
But control is not the same as optionality. And what we've tried to do is say, like, let's blow the option space wide open while still maintaining the level of regulatory control that we need to have in order to be tax exempt.
Yeah.
And I think that, that appeals to advisors as a better option than just like, oh, you want to give to a DAF, just go to Fidelity, like, all right, I guess it's no longer under my management. That's fine.
Yeah.
If you wind up putting $2 million in there, call me back because then I can manage the money and I want to do that.
Yeah. I see.
But we're like, no minimum on that. We'll come to your advisor's custodian, We'll open an account there. You take your crypto gains and you pick the split between, alternatives, index funds, your advisor managing it, right? Like there's still a level of oversight and control that endowment always retains in order to maintain the DAF expectation and regulatory compliance. But like the technology being asset type agnostic, the presence of a blockchain native record keeping system means that it's either on chain or anything anywhere else.
Yeah.
Right? Like when you're dealing with the hardest custodial environment, all the other custodial environments are cake.
Yeah.
And so I think we're really enjoying being asset type agnostic and providing to donors like one place where they can give all of the different things in their portfolio. What we know about investors is as they get younger, they increasingly have a more diverse set of asset types beyond just stocks, bonds, and securities. Right? And so for them, if they want to give to a DAF, it's like either it's in your E-Trade account or your Robinhood account, or it's not and you can't give it. Or you can give it and it's like a huge pain. And we're like, come to Endaoment where everything lives in one place and you get that flexibility. And we're seeing other people, Endaoment's not the only people like recognizing this opportunity. And, you mentioned Daffy, like we're big fans of Daffy and Daffy's fans of, like there are not many of the tech forward donor advised fund players in this space. I don't think it's winner take all.
Yeah.
And, both of us are sub 1% of donor advised assets.
Yeah.
And for regardless of who, like the presence of both of us pushes the other and also speaks to the opportunity to do better.
Yeah.
Than the status quo.
This is something I can't believe I haven't asked you before. So let's assume capital's like, you're a startup and you have runway and you have a roadmap that you need to be focused on. Let's take that out of the equation, right? And say you had a magic wand. Yeah. You have a magic wand.
Sick.
is there a way that you could, because at the end of the day, you're trying to, it seems like the big pie in the sky moonshot is Endaoment becomes a full-fledged wealth management shop, right? Where it's the DAF is nailed and then, everything else like also runs on this new technology that, you guys build out. Would there be, because like the way I see it is like these FAs are kind of the funnel. They're the funnel for Fidelity, right?
Yep.
Would there be a way, or if you could, is there another product that you could build that would create a funnel? And could you compete? Like, have you thought about that? Because to me, it's like, okay, that they're not like completely full stack integrated, but they are like a tethered to these OG DAF providers, right? And can you recreate that somehow? I don't know. It's just like, as listening to you talk about like, okay, we need to convince the FAs. It's like, is there a way to create your own funnel somehow?
You know this because you've seen some of our plans already, but like we see the DAF as an entry point or a wedge into the broader defined contribution space.
Okay. Yep.
Right? Or the tax mitigation, wealth preservation space. So there are a number of different vehicles that make up this sub-industry of financial advisory. That is like the 401k is like the one everybody knows. The IRA, also something everybody knows. SEP IRAs, not as common or as popular, but like increasing in popularity. That's like the oh God, I'm blanking on his name. How can I possibly? Peter Thiel. That's like the Peter Thiel Mondo IRA, where you take your startup stock and you contribute $6,500 of it at zero cost basis, right?
Yeah.
And then it goes public and it's worth $15 billion and you owe no tax on it, and that's when you start to get into like people being like, what the hell? And like, I get it. Yeah, I would be pissed too. But like we see opportunity to build out more accessible versions of 401ks, IRAs, SEP IRAs, charitable lead trusts, charitable remainder trusts, 529s, those are like college savings plans.
Yep.
They're often not, the margin profile isn't stellar, but it is a very locked in user base. Like once somebody holds those accounts with you, they're not going anywhere.
Right.
And I think part of the reason that we haven't launched those is the compliance work for those kinds of accounts is much more challenging than it is for a donor advised fund. Part of the reason why we chose the donor advised fund is because it's a pretty friendly compliance environment, right?
Gotcha.
Like you have to due diligence the nonprofits that you're funding. You have to due diligence donors to a certain degree, but you are not holding their money.
Yeah.
Right? Like the money you guys put into endowment is not yours anymore.
Right.
When you give it. You just get advisory privileges on it.
Right.
Which gives you this sense of directional control.
Yeah.
But there are guardrails. It's kind of like going to the bowling alley and asking for the bumpers to be put up.
Yeah.
It's like, we won't let you go in the gutter.
Yeah.
Right? And in IRAs and 401ks and 529s and charitable lead trusts, remainder trusts, it's still the individual's money.
Yeah.
And so the KYC AML, the SOC compliance, the charters that you need to have, and the additional controls to make sure you don't run away with other people's money are there for a reason.
Yeah.
And we like that reason, but it is for a much more mature business. It costs multiple millions of dollars to get chartered.
Gotcha.
In that way. And so like if I could wave a wand and give ourselves, a $10 million compliance budget to become federally chartered, like I don't know if that's going to cover it, but it would be a good start.
It'd be a good start.
And we would love to be thinking of endowment as like the place where you put money aside for either yourself, your family, or your community.
Yeah.
And that you do that with whatever is the thing that you want to put aside. And you do that through an application that makes it easy regardless of what it is that you're putting into that vehicle. And that you have the full menu to choose from, both in the vehicles that you're picking from and in the assets that you're contributing to it.
Yeah.
And right now that we're waiting, basically all of us, the United States taxpayer population, is waiting for basically 4 players to like become tech companies fast enough to give us that optionality.
Yeah.
And anytime you're in a position where there are these super powerful players who everybody's waiting for to do the innovation that presents an innovator's dilemma to them about cannibalizing their own business in some ways, like they're never going to do it fast enough. And that's the role of startups like ours, is to push that agenda and either get absorbed by one of those guys and bring that technology to them, or create the institution that we think is built in the image of the future.
Yeah.
Right? Like Elon's been running around saying like the future should look like the future. And I think when it comes to whether you or I are going to want to use Prudential, MetLife, Fidelity for our retirement accounts, or a DAO with a tokenized membership, like I know the answer to that already.
Yeah, totally. What does, now we're going tokenized membership.
Sure.
So it's weird, right? Because you're a crypto baby, this company. And
I
people
too am a crypto baby though.
Yeah. I was saying this the other day, where I was born like 5 years too late. Otherwise I would have been crypto rich by now, because like everything that people were doing with crypto, like I liked poker. That was my example. Like to play poker online, you got Bitcoin, and
Yeah.
you would have accidentally just had Bitcoin, and then so many people got rich that way. I was like, when I was 23, 22, 20, like that range, it was like 2017 Bitcoin pops, you know. I was just a tiny bit late. So I'm not a total crypto baby, but kind of get pissed when I think about how
Like
close I was to
Gen crypto. You know, I think, you want me to drop some truth on you?
Dude, rabbit hole me, let's go.
I think there are people younger than you who I think are crypto babies.
Oh,
right?
yeah, totally.
And so, like,
they're better at the game than me.
yeah, you know, like, and in some ways, it's not even being better at the game. It's like a willingness to experiment.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think for everybody who's thinking about or has traded the crypto markets, there's no vehicle that will teach you more about yourself and your own investment pitfalls, your own bad habits, your own toxic traits, you know, like your own insecurities. You'll learn about them faster than you would anywhere else.
Yeah.
Except for maybe like sports, I would say.
Yeah.
Like if you're really putting yourself out there in sports, like you're learning about your own mental toughness.
Totally.
Same is true for the crypto markets.
Totally.
And I think, you know, it's not about when you were born. It's not about whether you get it or not. It's not about, you know, like how technologically savvy you are. Although those things can affect your performance. It's really about curiosity and willingness to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Willingness to take on exposure.
And there's an increasing amount of people, I think, that are like, maybe they're not that willing to take on exposure and be vulnerable, but like it's just becoming more ubiquitous, so it's more addressable.
Yeah, it's easier to follow, right, than to lead. And I think it's what's great about crypto though is like it's not like there's this cabal of people who now hold the sticks.
Yeah.
Right? Like
it
is just as permissionless, just as easy to exit from any of these networks. Like the exit costs in crypto are much, much lower than in any other traditional market.
No doubt.
Right? And so the ability for anybody to come in and be like, I have capital.
Yeah.
You know, like you can milk the market if you have capital.
Yeah.
It's just about how vulnerable are you willing to feel? How much are you willing to believe in yourself?
Yeah.
And so in that way, I think like, you know, there are people all across the age and experience spectrum who are feeling left out.
Yeah.
And there are people all across the age and experience spectrum who are like having the time of their life.
Yeah.
Because they don't need anybody's permission to go and play. Right? And I think like part of why it's fun to work on Endaoment is like, here's a space where if you're not really comfortable with crypto in general, but you get charitable giving or you get tax mitigation or you get donor advised funds or you get wealth preservation or any of those things, like here's a space where you can do some experimentation.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Like if we become people's first experience in decentralized financial protocols, or if we are a person's first experience in, you know, community governance or quadratic funding or, you know, even just interacting with a smart contract, even if they don't know that they've done it, right? Like you're putting yourself out there, you're being vulnerable, you're getting in the mix.
Totally.
And I think I like to think of Endaoment, I like to think of crypto as like a magic beanstalk, right? And like you can invest anywhere along the beanstalk. You can choose to go right to the top of the beanstalk from the very jump and like be deep in layer threes, you know, buying obscure meme coins today. Yeah. Like you could go and do that from your bank account, have never bought a stable coin today, you know, and be by the end of the day, maybe by the end of the day, you're like trading meme coins.
Got to download Slingshot.
Yeah. Got down the slingshot, go on Dymo, liquidate some cash into USDC, whatever, right? And that's like, that requires a ton of bravery to go that hard, that fast.
Yeah.
And so when I think about the Magic Beanstalk, I'm like, I want Endaoment to be like the Walmart greeter at the bottom of the Magic Beanstalk.
Gotcha.
That's like, welcome to this safe, friendly place of new technology. And, you can stay here at the bottom for as long as you like. You don't have to go full degen.
Yeah.
In order to start to recognize the benefits of programmatic money.
Yeah. So then you said, and kind of a hint here, but you said tokenized community, referring to Endaoment.
Yeah.
And I know this is not something that's coming tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you balance that? Because what that means, Endaoment issues a token, and you have investors, or you have a B2B pipeline with these traditional finance people, and you're working so hard to be that Walmart on the bottom of the beanstalk that's open, friendly, inviting, and abstracting away so much of the stuff that I think is fun, you think is fun, a lot of people do, but is chaotic to people.
Yeah.
At the same time, like, true to what you're doing, and part of the reason why any of this is interesting is because you guys are born and raised crypto babies.
Yeah.
And the idea of a token and innovating what it means to be a community organization sounds awesome. So how do you balance that in year 4?
There's a really successful protocol called Compound. Multiple billions of dollars in assets locked in the protocol, and they're like a money market.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember years ago going to I think it was like 2019. I went to a conference where the CEO of Compound was speaking, and he was talking about, like, what do you need to do in order to be in a position to launch a token? And he made this argument that I'll never forget, which is that you can't, until you have a functioning business that's sustainable and able to stand on its own, that's providing a financial service through a protocol, the token is effectively meaningless.
It's actually bad.
Yeah.
It's confusing.
You get people in who are focused on the wrong incentives.
Yeah, they're speculating. So the way I heard it described to me was, don't launch a token until you find product market fit.
Right.
Because you'll never know if you have product market fit while there's this 90% of your holders are just playing games with your token.
Yeah, and it can be very distracting. It can be very hard.
Yeah.
That being said, like, one of my big insecurities about Endaoment is that, like, we're not decentralized enough.
Yeah.
But, like, we're at the bottom of the beanstalk, and if we're super decentralized and the bottom of the beanstalk is now no longer approachable because people don't understand what the hell that means, that's a problem for us. And we're not yet at that product market fit space. We've done $85 million in donations, and most people hear that and they're like, and I'll never forget. I was talking to my mother. My mother is like lifelong nonprofit professional, volunteer. And she's like, wow, small numbers. And I'm like,
she gets it.
I'm like, thanks, Mom. She's right.
Yeah.
It is small numbers. It is small potatoes. Like 1% of the DAF market is $2.5 billion in assets under management. There are $250 billion sitting in donor advised funds right now.
Yeah.
Right? So 10 basis points of the market is $250 million.
Mm-hmm.
And 1 basis point is $25 million. We have $13 million in assets under management. Right? So, like, I would not consider us anywhere close to product market fit because we're not actively sapping existing donor advised fund providers of their assets under management because we're providing something better and more aligned.
Yeah.
And until we do that, there's not a revenue stream. There's not an influence stream that's big enough to justify any sort of
Yeah.
liquid token scenario.
Yeah.
And to make a token feel like it has inherent utility, and to make it feel like it has inherent value to hold and to accumulate and to use in the system.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, we're a US 501c3.
Mm-hmm.
And Scary Gary's been patrolling the streets for 4 years, and anybody who's U.S. based who's been doing anything with tokens has gotten a Wells, basically.
Yeah.
And obviously we're seeing some of that change with the new administration. And pick your poison, choose your fighter. Gains now or social unrest later, but we'll leave that to the side for the minute, and just say it is important for the U.S. economy to be more accepting and open to the experimentation that's happening amongst the digital asset space, especially around corporate governance and, utility-driven tokens that give you rights to help oversee organizations that need to be held accountable.
Yeah.
And we're no different. We have an amazing board of 5 people. And we haven't yet blown open the doors to letting our entire community, elect our board of directors. But that's because if we did it in the way that we wanted to, we risk the underlying service that we provide, which is tax exemption.
Yep.
And so we can't threaten the tax exemption.
Yeah.
But in a dream world, if I could wave a wand, I would say everybody who's ever held a DAF at Endaoment becomes the core holders of the token alongside the people who have believed in the mission from the beginning. And over time, we continue to issue tokens to people who are being philanthropic. And that, we talk about $25 million as 1 basis point, 250 as 10, $2.5 billion is 1%. At $2.5 billion, even if we scale our team significantly, our revenue picture is such that there's more revenue than expenses.
Yeah.
And we're at a nonprofit, and it's like, okay, who are the people who are pushing the mission forward? Well, it's all the people who are using the DAFs.
Yeah.
And when you compare the idea of if I use my DAF actively at Fidelity Charitable, I'm not getting Fidelity points.
Right.
I'm not getting any more oversight over the Fidelity Charitable apparatus. I'm not getting any more social clout or any sort of reputational impact.
Right.
Right? Those are all things that tokens can start to play a meaningful role in and change the dynamic of people's feeling of belonging and involvement in their financial institution. And if there's one thing we know we're feeling about financial institutions is they're just soulless black boxes that charge rent on your assets under management.
Yep.
And the opportunity for tokens to come in and change that dynamic a little bit is, even if it just changes it a little tiny bit, is amazing, because down the line we're going to see more and more institutions taking more and more aggressive positions about the role of tokenized membership or the role of a native asset that determines the efficacy of the protocol or determines the efficacy of the service or determines the leadership and accountability architectures of the service.
Yep.
At any of these community foundations, there are plenty of 501c3s that are sus, right? And oftentimes there's a closed door group of people who are deciding what sus means. Whether we're going to allow a grant to the KKK go through. KKK, 501c3.
Yeah.
Right? There are plenty of hate organizations out there, people who are actively pushing for the subjugation of others through a tax-exempt nonprofit.
Crazy.
Right. We don't want to be a part of that, but we also don't want to be doing black box curation.
Right.
Without community input.
Right.
And talk about something that a token can have an amazing point of view on, or an amazing democratizing influence upon. Right? That's just one of the areas that we really see opportunity for community participation and a sense of belonging and a sense of ownership in a space where there is no such thing as an owner.
Right.
right? It's just about community engagement. And so, stay tuned.
Yeah.
I am optimistic about our ability to make the bottom of the beanstalk really be a DAO.
Yeah.
And to those in the crypto community, we're forever grateful for your patience with us.
Yeah.
Just because, I think people always want you to go faster.
Yeah.
There are people way up the beanstalk who are doing it.
Yeah.
Right? But they're doing it in the Caymans, or they're doing it in Switzerland, or they're doing it, without any governing legal liability.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And
or at least one less or whatever.
Some amount of compromise on that, right? Yeah. And we're like unable to compromise on the tax mitigation component because otherwise the protocol is worthless.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
It's just a payment facilitator to charities, which there are plenty of.
Yeah.
Right? Like without the tax exemption, we're kind of like dead in the water. And so we're defending the tax exemption and moving as fast as we can towards taking what is sole membership and turning it into a distributed, decentralized membership of people on the internet who are being actively sort of scored and rewarded based on how philanthropic they're being.
Yeah.
And how much engagement they're driving.
Yeah.
If they're bringing in new organizations to the system, you would get more, you could see a scenario where you get more tokens if you were actively broadening the reach of the organization versus somebody who just gives to the same organization every single time. But maybe also there's value in giving to the same organization every single time. And so you should get a little bit more of a boost when you're on your 10th grant to the same organization because you're like a regular benefactor. And so you're showcasing something else. What is so cool about tokens is we've never had a carrot to try and direct giving activity.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Because normally the carrot is just the tax deduction.
Yeah.
And with tokens, we can start to give people influence in a programmatic way.
Yeah.
Over the future of the organization based on the quality of their interaction or their engagement.
Yeah.
Which is now we start to get to the hyper.
Yep.
That's where I start to geek out, right?
Yeah,
It's how do we start to make better givers of ourselves?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
By crafting token reward architectures that don't just penalize you, that we're not just talking about penalties for not giving, and we're talking about rewards for giving.
Yeah. Yeah, it's incredible. I think it's weird. When you think about as a founder, you build. I don't know. I guess it depends on who you ask. You build with some kind of target in mind, right? At some point we IPO, right? Or at some point we get acquired by Nike or whatever, right? Somebody's building towards this goal. Is that kind of your goal? At some point, Endaoment is tokenized. Is that your we made it moment?
It's a we made it moment, not because it's a liquidity event.
Right.
It's it operationally won't be a liquidity event.
Yeah.
The thing won't be liquid.
Yeah.
On day zero. That's how we've structured anything around tokens is that they release over many years kind of thing.
Right.
And that's important to the community because they don't want to feel like they're going to get rugged by they don't want to feel like the token is just a liquidity event, right?
Totally.
So it has to mean something more than that. And I think the problem with a lot of tokens is that it doesn't.
So I guess
and so for me it's we haven't really fulfilled our namesake until we tokenize.
So yeah, exactly. So with everything that you just said about the purpose of a token and the direction you're going, it's kind of you're making the token your made it moment. It's not arbitrarily, or it's not just for granted a we made it moment where a company tokenizes, but for you and the goals that you have around the token, I feel like it could be.
There are many ways to interpret the name Endaoment.
Yeah.
Right? We can think of ourselves as a DOW endowment, where you're a corpus of money that's meant to fuel charitable activity for many years to come. We spell it DAO, which is Decentralized Autonomous Organization, and there are many different interpretations of what a DAO is, and many different ideas of what makes somebody a DAO versus like just a group of people on the internet.
Yeah.
And in many ways, like I think Endaoment has fulfilled my own definition of being a DAO. Mm-hmm. Despite the fact that we're, powered by multi-sigs, we're a completely distributed team, like we're placed all over the world. We're using smart contracts to administer financial services that we have, thousands and thousands of contract addresses that are working in concert together, mostly automated to make charitable giving a thing. But like, to me, the definition of a DAO is like you have a token-based voting body that is holding accountable the oversight architecture.
The governance aspect of it.
Yeah. Right. And like that's critical to it. And we haven't gotten there yet. Mm-hmm. But like that's the vision.
Yeah, I love it.
And I would be, like that to me is going to feel like when you've built something, you come to this point where it's like, okay, I've gotten to these different milestones that I set for myself, whether it's 1 employee or 10 employees or raising a certain amount of capital or hitting a certain amount of volume or, maybe even like specific OKRs around your actual product. But the thing that when it's unclear what's going to happen to Endaoment, the thing that I often like kind of fall back on wanting to have happen is I want it to be able to live without me.
Yeah.
Like the what happens if you died test.
Yeah.
Like if I died tomorrow, would this community foundation live on?
Yeah.
And in that question is embedded in the tokenization. Mm-hmm. Right? Like if there's a group of people who have legal right to setting the leadership of this organization, and it doesn't require any action from me personally to enforce that will, like that means you've built something kind of regenerative that can exist on its own.
Ethereum and Vitalik, like, I mean, he's a thought leader and we don't want to lose him, but that, it passes the test, right? Where everything is in place, the token has its use, there's, core devs and whatever, right?
And like, especially in a place that's like more about tax mitigation, that's more practical and, that's like less theoretically exciting as Ethereum is. Yeah. It's hard to get there fast.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to be patient with myself. And
you're also like directly trying to disrupt one of the like biggest institutions that our country has ever seen, our world has ever seen.
Like they're super comfy.
Yeah.
Right. And like there wasn't a world computer before Ethereum.
Right.
Now there is.
Yeah.
Right. And there still isn't really a community owned and operated public charity DAF sponsor. Yeah. Like there are a lot of regional community foundations that do very involved giving. Like there are lots of DAF providers out there that are just like, the San Francisco Community Foundation or the New York Community Foundation, and they're regional. But they also tend to be like led by big donors and, really beholden to certain either like faith groups or certain cause areas. And it's like, we need the lowest common denominator, most accessible, community powered donor advised fund provider to be the base level infrastructure, like a public utility almost.
Yeah.
And that's the hope.
Yeah.
Is that Endaoment, sort of achieves that escape velocity to begin orbiting the world on its own. Yeah.
So you said it's small. We can wrap up here shortly, but I can't let you leave without highlighting the wins and some good work that you guys have helped facilitate, because we get to see it all the time. 85 million, like your mom said, has a long way to go, but it's not like these 4 years have been you guys alone in the room,
Totally. No. And I think like I was saying this earlier that the nonprofits are excited whether it's $100 or it's 100,000.
Yeah.
You know, and I certainly have some favorites. We did a lot of fundraising after the war broke out in Ukraine.
Yeah, I remember that.
And have been able to really track the impact of the medical supplies and the groceries that we're buying, you know, like the blockchain and the communities around crypto, people like Ukraine DAO or Unchained DAO that we've been lucky to work with, who have been doing the fundraising, and then we do the distribution, but like they're enforcing grant making restrictions that like create paper trails for, you know, one of the things we hear most often is like, I want to know where my money was spent when I give it to an org. And we've seen some really cool examples over the years, especially with humanitarian aid in Ukraine and other areas. That's been really great. You know, we've seen a lot of disaster relief as well, a lot of fundraising for disaster relief. But by and large, our community is mostly focused on medical research. So like deep R1 institutions that are doing research that otherwise doesn't get funding. So like we see a lot of our largest category in 2023 was education. I think we sent like $10 million to higher education organizations in 2023. And this year it will also be our largest category of grant recipient. And oftentimes we're funding things that are not like huge national priorities. Like we've seen a lot of psilocybin research get funded through Endaoment. We've seen a lot of longevity research. The crypto crowd has this sort of kindred spirit with the longevity crowd. And so they love to like focus on ways to improve quality of life. Like really the longevity crowd is just like, how do you live a biologically younger life for longer? Right? And so it's been really cool to like get involved with those organizations. I come from a journalism background. Before I ever worked in media or technology, I was like, I went to school for journalism. And it's been awesome to see people funding like the CPJ, the Committee to Protect Journalists, and a number of other sort of like free speech oriented organizations like the EFF. We see a lot of people standing up for like code as speech. And that's increasingly more important in our very dystopian world that we exist in. And then even this year with the conflict in the Middle East, it's been really just a huge vehicle for me to engage with like my own history, to be able to do humanitarian aid with organizations in Gaza or in the West Bank. Even inside Israel with, you know, groups of people who have been affected by the shared violence that's been going down. And I think it's so nice to work on something that you always have this connection to the real world around. Right? That like, you know, the market can go down, the market can go up, the technology can break, the technology can work, the fundraising can go well, the fundraising can go poorly. But at the end of the day, there is this paper trail of impact that nobody can undo. And I think that really, that helps with the extreme lows, especially, but also with the extreme highs. Right? Like it's like it keeps you grounded. And you know, whether it's the beanstalk metaphor or it's like about not getting too in your head as a founder, like we really try to keep our feet on the ground and give people experiences that are grandma proof, you know, that are translatable, because the technology itself is complex enough. You know, like the systems itself are opaque and complex enough. And so how do we try and increase accessibility? How do we try to increase comfort with these complex topics, these complex issues, whether it's your own finances or it's global geopolitics or it's, you know, your local community's gentrification mitigation plan.
Yeah.
You know, like those things all need a little bit of abstraction. The value of working at Endaoment is that there's kind of like a stable heartbeat that is the interactions that you have with nonprofits who are getting grants, who are like, wow, this is going to do this for us, or this is going to feed X number of people. This is going to build wells for Y number of communities across the global South, or this is going to make Z kind of difference in this inner city in, you know, Midwest America.
100%.
And I think like if you don't have that baseline heartbeat, that baseline motivator of why you're waking up every day and doing this, you become kind of beholden to where you are on that spectrum of either super high or super low. And the reality is that getting from 0 to 1 to 10 to 100, you know, or whatever your metric is for success with a startup is going to take 7 years.
Yeah.
You know, it's like overnight successes are 7-year stories.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and either you have extreme endurance for discomfort.
Yeah.
Not either. You already have to come in the gate with extreme tolerance for discomfort and vulnerability.
Yeah.
But it's made a little bit easier when you have a mission that is irrefutable.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the message there too is not everybody's going to build Endaoment like you are. But take that anecdote and listen to me say that we're investors, we're capitalists, but we have really good leaders in Joe Sandberg and Peter Robert Casey, and it's ingrained in us at JDS Sports that our profits are driven by purpose, and the work that you help us do by managing our donor advised fund is the thing that lights us up. Like when we go in there to a nonprofit and we change everything they're trying to do, we expedite it, we let them impact all of these lives, we work with them closely. That's the purpose. The rest of it, there are, you know, I've been here since 2019. There have been awesome highs, there have been wins, there have been lows. But it's, for us, a similar story, like that stability, you know, and like that, okay, PRC, I've had to see him do some really hard stuff, you know, like there's been some awesome moments where I'm like, oh man, this guy's got the easiest job, or not the easiest, but the best job, the happiest job, you know? And other moments where I'm like, damn, I don't want to trade seats with him right now. This is horrible. Like you got to go in there with a founder who's selling whatever is left of their company. You got to right-size companies. Like that stuff sucks. And he's an empathetic dude. Yeah. And you know, I think I know what drives him is we need to make profits so that Play with Purpose, our donor advised fund, can just continue to make our little changes in the world, you know?
Well, you know, you asked me what some of my favorite work is, and honestly, like you guys are doing stuff at such a high production value. Yeah. And at such a high level with organizations that honestly sometimes I forget that like we're the nonprofit behind it, because it feels like you guys are like your own independent operating situation, even though you're just rolling through a DAF. And I think like in the same way that like we want people to feel like you don't need to start a whole family foundation with a board of directors and have tens of millions of dollars in a family foundation in order to feel like you're making a difference, right? Like it's amazing what adding a little bit of impact into your everyday bottom line does for how you show up.
No doubt, man.
No doubt. To the core portfolio. Yeah. Right? Because now you have a little bit stronger sense of yourself. Yeah. And a little bit more self-awareness and more self-confidence. Yeah. And I think like it's been so cool to see. There's a great video for anybody who hasn't seen it. If you go to endaoment.org/playwithpurpose, you can see this amazing video that you guys produced about the work that you've done. And it's like, sometimes I forget that like there are all these courts around the New York area and around the country that are
Yeah.
painted thanks to Project
It's
Backboard.
like 35 now.
Yeah, and like the other day, like I walked by a court. I don't remember where
There's
I was.
one right over here.
Yeah, I walked by a court and I was like, it's like, oh, like I work at Magic Internet Money, but that court is painted because
Yeah.
because we made this thing.
Yeah.
And it's a small piece of the puzzle, right? Like
Totally.
there's plenty of other people and programs to congratulate on the production of that impact. But it is it's such a great fallback to have a tangible, visible impact of
Yeah,
your
totally.
work as a founder.
Totally.
And yeah, you know, huge shout out to you guys, and you know, thanks for making it happen and believing in your ability to make a change.
Yeah. Well, thanks for making my life easy, because I'm the one on the sticks, you know, making the grant recommendations and trying to do the portfolio allocations and stuff like that. And it's seamless. It's really good stuff. And I guess that's the call to action. It's the 11th of December today. You got like 20 days here to go get your tax write-offs in. And,
you have to do it.
You have to do it
before the end of the year.
Before the end of the year.
And you know, we'll be online till midnight Hawaii time.
Nice.
12:31.
Cool.
So, you know, the sooner the better. We appreciate people letting us know. I don't know. Are we going to release this before the end of the year?
For this reason, I'm going to try and get it out as quickly as possible.
We're gonna pump it out. All right, cool.
Yeah.
So you know, you have to give before the end of the year in order for it to account against your taxes this year. And yeah, this is our favorite. This is the most wonderful time of the year, man.
Yeah, giving season.
Yeah, it's giving season. It's giving season. So and we actually just sent you a little care package
Oh, nice.
from our mascot Daft Squatch.
I didn't even know Daft Squatch existed.
Well, now
It's
you
new.
will.
Now I will.
Now you will. DaftSquatch.xyz.
Okay. And endaoment.org.
Endaoment.org. Endaoment.
Cool.
.org.
Awesome. All right, dude. Well, thanks for coming in.
Dude, this was great.
That was a lot of fun. Yeah.
We talked for hours.
Yeah. There's going to be some good stuff in there. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.